headliner of WrestleMania 1 and, WrestleMania 3 against Andre the Giant took him to a whole different level where he became really a global superstar and a really, really big name, household name in the United States. By the end of the 80s, Hulk Hogan was just a guy that everyone knew. He was a celebrity that everyone knew. The 90s were a little bit difficult for WWF, which is where he was wrestling at the time. They were embroiled in this steroid scandal where a doctor that was working with them, who worked for the Pennsylvania Athletic Commission, he was charged with distributing steroids to athletes. And some of those names that came up in his files were wrestlers from the WWF. And that dragged the entire promotion, the WWF, into a trial against the feds, with Vince McMahon being, the defendant, the head of WWF. And he was accused of not just distributing steroids, but also encouraging his wrestlers to use steroids. Otherwise, they would not get, that opportunity, the big push to win a championship or what have you. And it was a really difficult time for the WWF because of that, because they're on trial against the feds. They're spending a lot of money defending themselves. And also, reputationally, it was difficult because it was a little, looking back now, it's like, yeah, those guys were on steroids, like, obviously, right? But then we were kind of naive to the steroid situation, right? In the early 90s, we didn't know, we didn't want to know that Hulk Hogan was using steroids, and he was, and he admitted on under oath that he was. And the issue that really began his departure from the WWF was that the feds were trying to get Hogan to testify against Vince McMahon at the trial. And he did that. He testified for the prosecution, but he did not give the testimony that they thought that he was going to give. He did not go against Vince McMahon. But in any case, because of that, the fact that he testified for the prosecution against McMahon was enough for that relationship to really fracture. And the WWF let him go when his contract was over in '93. And he was kind of at a crossroads where it was like he felt like he still had more in him. Vince McMahon, aside from the fact that there was those hard feelings because of the trial, Vince McMahon really did believe that Hulk Hogan's time at the top of the industry was over. It had been almost a decade at that point of him being the top guy. And even in that match that I mentioned before that got me into wrestling, Vince McMahon was already trying to like put the torch in someone else's hand, the Ultimate Warrior being the first guy. That didn't work out. So Vince McMahon was fine moving on from Hulk Hogan, felt he was old and past his prime. But Hogan still wanted to wrestle, and he still felt like he had more left in him from that perspective. He tried doing some Hollywood stuff, and he did that, but nothing really broke through as far as being a big time show or movie. And he was filming Thunder in Paradise, which is it was like a '90s show that was awfully similar to Baywatch. I think it was even on at the same time, or like right after Baywatch at one point, and which Baywatch was obviously a big show in the '90s. And he was filming it in Orlando at Disney MGM Studios. And that just so happened to be where WCW was doing their television tapings for some of their syndicated programs. So as the story goes, and I don't know if this is 100% true, and I kind of, in the book I kind of mentioned that there are different tellings of this tale, but basically Ric Flair, who was the franchise wrestler for WCW, started kind of going over to where Thunder in Paradise was being shot and started talking to Hogan, trying to get him to come over to WCW, trying to convince him. And look, it was probably inevitable anyway. If Vince McMahon doesn't want anything to do with you and you still want to wrestle, you still think you're a top guy in the industry, and he, as far as name value goes, he was the top guy in the industry. Inevitably, he was going to end up in WCW. Ted Turner owned WCW. He was a billionaire, so if you're going to wrestle somewhere, Hulk Hogan's going to do it for a lot of money, and Ted Turner had a lot of money. So that's kind of how, it went. And Eric Bischoff, who was the senior vice president of WCW, started to go over and talk to Hogan as well. And then it all kind of culminated in a meeting with Ted Turner at CNN Center here in Atlanta, where I live. And that kind of sealed the deal. And that was it. And Hogan ended up jumping ship. And the thing about it, too, is that despite the acrimony between Hogan and McMahon at the time, Hogan had always promised, if we parted ways, I will not compete against you, Vince. I will not go against you to the competitor. And he broke his word. And he went over to WCW and he started competing head to head on Monday nights with the WWF and Vince McMahon, his former very close friend and promoter. And that was kind of the table setter, right, for what was to come next.
If you enjoyed that clip, make sure you head over to www.bookupapp.com to download our app so you can connect with your favorite bookish content creators, start conversations, and start your own book club.